You may have noticed that our producer, Clare has been quiet the last few episodes. That is because she just started a new job. That's right, our amazing producer is spreading more awesomeness across this world. She landed herself a really cool job at a morning show in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Working for a morning show has meant her schedule has been a little crazy lately. So, she has been working harder behind the scenes than in front of the mic here at Young PR Pros. But guess what? Listeners of this episode are in for a special treat. Clare is back for a special episode to talk about tips and advice for the first few days of a new job. The first 30 days are crucial in a new job. You can use these precious first days to form excellent first impressions that can lead to long-lasting relationships in your new organization. Young PR Pros calls this the 30-Day Challenge. In this episode, our hosts and producer will share their 30-Day Challenge tips and advice so you can make your first days at a new job count. And now, on with the show. Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Young PR Pros, a podcast for the young and young at heart PR pros looking for tips and advice on how to build and advance their careers. I am Christine Darbell in Ottawa, Canada.
I'm Ross Simmons in Halifax, Nova Scotia.
And I'm Clare Bonnyman in Winnipeg, Manitoba.
Wait a minute, is that Clare?
Clare's back.
Well,
hi guys.
Welcome back to our virtual recording studio. We really missed you.
It's true.
Thanks. Yeah, I missed you guys too.
See your face on Twitter, but we don't even see each other's face on this, so it's kind of the same.
No, it's true. It's true. I'm all over the Twitter, guys. I'm not dead yet.
No. I love watching your tweets, by the way. It always brightens up my day. You've got such a great sense of humor.
Good. Oh, good. Oh, I'm glad. I was going to say, if I just do them for me, it gets a little sad. So.
Fair enough.
So, Clare, tell us. So the reason why you've been a little quiet is because you've been at a new job. So tell us about your new job.
So yes, I started a new job, and part of the reason that I'm not on the podcast as much as my job has really intense hours, which I'll explain a little bit. And I'm going to be completely honest. I would love to sit here and tell you guys it's the greatest thing in the world and I'm a natural and I'm super happy, but the truth is that it's really hard. That's not to say that it's not an awesome job and I'm enjoying myself, but I kind of had to debate what I was actually going to say coming on today because I would love to just sit here and tell you guys all the good parts and leave out all the nasty pieces of things that have happened over the last couple months, but that felt wrong. I think a lot of other people are in the same boat as me. You know, when you start your first real job and it's supposed to be everything you've ever wanted and you're finally a real human and you have benefits and it's like, oh, dental, and it's so amazing. And the truth is that it's really hard. And at first, at least, you're going to have some bad days, like a lot in my case. So even if it's the best job, I really don't want to gloss over that fact. So preamble aside, it is honestly a really awesome position, and I'm really excited to be where I am right now. It's an amazing team of people. I work not only with the morning show at the station I work at, but I also get to work a lot with the broader newsroom. So there's like a ton of really incredibly talented and patient folks, which is awesome. So what my job basically comes down to is I wake up really early. I get up around 2:30 every morning. So that's when the alarm goes off. I don't get to snooze at all, and I'm at my desk for 3:30. I take stories and scripts from other networks and shows and set them up for the day. So I rewrite them so they're correct for our show and our day and our audience. I write breaking news scripts if they happen and reformat so it actually fits our station. So I kind of get to tell people what to say on TV, which is kind of cool, but also a lot of responsibility. And then throughout the show, I keep doing that. So for 3 hours, I'm updating stories, writing new ones, handling guests, helping them. So when they come in for interviews, they know where to go and they go on TV and they look good when they do it. And anything else that anyone needs help with during the show. And then after the show, I prep stuff for the next day. Again, helping out with anything that anyone needs. So I write contests, I write other stories and things that are ready to go. I do any pre-interviews or pre-tapes that we have. I help with those. And then I also help with anything that the producer of our new news broadcast needs. So writing stories, cutting scripts, and all that kind of stuff. And some days are better than others. I think that learning curve is something I'm very much in the middle of right now. Like if there's a low and a high, I keep jumping back and forth. And as much as I hate it, I think everyone at the station is so helpful and kind when I make my stupid mistakes and learn things I've never come across before. And it's hard, it's challenging, and it's worth it. I'm learning, but yeah, it's hard. So like today, for example, was a really bad day, but it keeps going, and a bad day means that I won't make mistakes again, or maybe at least I'm going to try as hard as I can not to, so I don't have another bad day like this one. So yeah, I mean, after about 8 hours of doing all that kind of stuff, I'm pretty wiped, and I head home, and that's my Monday to Friday now, a 2 a.m. wake-up call, a lot of coffee, and a lot of learning.
So well, what is a 2 a.m. wake-up call?
Yeah, like my alarm goes off at like 2 a.m. or like 2:30. It's great because I can finally tell my dad that he's sleeping in when he gets up at 6.
That's crazy.
Which is a really good feeling. Like he'll be like, "Oh, I'm so tired," and I'm like, "Really? Are you?"
I've been up for 4 hours already.
Exactly. Well, it's funny too. Like you go on, you say like Twitter, right? Like I go on Twitter and I'll maybe send out a couple tweets. I've taken to tweeting out the foods that I crave at 3 or 4 a.m., which is kind of a weird thing, but
it's hilarious.
Honestly, sometimes it's like stuffing, right? Like it's not normal foods. And more often than not, when I finally start eating my breakfast at like 6 or whatever, because you try not to throw off your whole day, I've packed like oatmeal and I'm craving steak, and it's the most frustrating experience ever. But I go on and, I know when people wake up because they start responding to my text messages and my tweets. So it's kind of fun to watch the world wake up.
That's awesome.
Well, I think it's really good for our audience that you took this honest approach to it, because I think more often than not, people want to talk about all the, the fun and the great aspects about their job. And very rarely do people step back and say, but it's not 100% amazing every single day. And I think it's important, especially when you're starting, for a lot of our listeners, starting their first job or even starting your second or third job, right? There's going to be days that are going to be great. And I find that especially those that first month or that first, maybe first 6 months, there's a lot of up and downs because you're still learning. If you're in a new industry, or if you're going from an agency to a corporate world, there's all these new things that you have to learn, things that you might have these great writing skills, you might have great interpersonal skills, but doesn't mean that there's not going to be challenges when you get on a new job. So I think it's refreshing and important for our listeners to hear the honesty in your voice and to hear the fact that yes, there's some great, awesome days, but there's also some really bad days.
Yep. That's the thing, right? It's like a balance. You win some, you lose some. And it's really important to pat yourself on the back when good things happen, but also, have an equal reaction when things go bad, right? Like you can't be over the moon when you have a great day and then feel the world crumble when you don't. You have to find a balance and take the wins and the losses in the right ways. So it's just all about finding that balance as you enter a new space. So yeah.
And those bad days are just days that you're learning more lessons, right? It's another thing that you can kind of put in that bucket of like, okay, I learned my lesson. I will not do that again, or I will do it differently, or whatever that lesson is. And those days are probably as important, if not even more important, than the days where you're patting yourself on the back and, telling yourself you did a good job, because those lessons learned will turn into, the more lessons learned that you have, the more good days and pat on the back days that you'll get.
It's like being at school, except it actually matters.
That's a good way of thinking about it. It's true.
Yeah. Oh, well, it sounds like you're having fun and doing a remarkable job. I'm sure every single one in that room and in that organization is lucky to have you. But, seeing as you are talking about new jobs, I thought we could use this episode to share tips and advice for listeners for the first 30 days of their on the job. And as we had said in the intro, it's kind of this 30-day challenge, because I think it is a pretty, you could just like start a new job and then, sit in your desk and then take the first 30 days to get your feet wet, or you could do a 30-day challenge where you jump in and you take those 30 days to accomplish as many things as possible, whether that's, first impressions, which we'll talk about later today, or connecting with different people in the organization, or giving yourself a goal. What am I going to do in the first 30 days? So that as you're have your training wheels on and you're learning about the new organization and building your skills, you've got something to work towards. Because more often than not, when you start a new job, you don't really have a task or a big project or something. There's nothing at the end of that 30-day tunnel. It's just sit here and start. And sometimes, I know especially for me, that can be hard. I need that goal. I need to work towards something. So while I'm learning about a new organization and building skills for a new job, I like to have that goal that I could work towards at the end of the month. So let's start with you, Ross. What do you do, or what have you done in the past in the first month in a new job?
Yeah, so it's been a while since I had a first month in a job, but I do hire people to have their first month working with me. So I think it might be good to kind of talk through like what I believe is like the best approach for that kind of first month. What I believe is really important is kind of sinking your teeth in and not really doing too much heavy lifting in that first, say, 2 weeks, and more so, just spend a lot of time learning from the people around you. So what we do at my company is we ensure that the first kind of week is spent primarily talking and leading, learning. You're sent a handful of different resources on a variety of different things that you'll be doing. You're given a very extensive kind of boot camp where you're learning how to create content, how to distribute content, and do your job. And then once you've done that, you start to execute some mini projects that are essentially giving you the ability to kind of execute, so we can see how you're developing, how far along you are. And then eventually towards the end of that month, you start to get into what Claire was talking about, where it's the work that matters, and everybody will kind of get to see that content. So we really start with a very extensive training process. We believe that training is super important. And I think that when you're spending that first month, you want to learn as much as you can. And it can be overwhelming. Like, you're going to have to put in the late nights and the early mornings to get up to speed. But that should be really a key objective of yours, is to get up to speed quickly so you can start contributing to the team. So in that first month, learn as much as you can, understand the corporate culture, and ensure that you're getting that kind of support from your team so you can truly be learning, so you can execute and deliver results for everybody around you.
And I think you bring up a good point, Ross. For some of our listeners who might be starting a job, but they don't have this extensive training set in place, like, you're obviously a really good person to work for. But if you do go into an organization where basically they say, here's your computer, here's a mouse, and here's your login, I'll come back in when I've got something for you to do. That does happen. In those cases, then take from, Ross's book and say, okay, so then my goal for the first 2 weeks or the first month is learn as much as I can. You now have a log on to your computer and you have internet. So there's nothing stopping you from going online and, downloading or reading as many news releases from that organization as possible. Or start asking if, is there a corporate policy document that you could read up on, which is probably really dry, but probably, gives you some good insight into the organization. So if you don't have that training set out, then make that training for yourself. What about you, Claire? What did you do in your first 30 days in your new job?
First off, to kind of jump off of that idea, it's training, right? Like, every job, whether it's in place or not, the first few weeks, months, whatever, it's training. It's a learning process. So my advice kind of sounds brutal, but just lose your dignity. Like, honestly, there is no place for it more honest than not. And maybe dignity isn't the right word, but you really have to lose that cocky self-assuredness you feel like you had to show in the interview, because that was talking about it and now you're doing it. So you, like, you know, in the famous words of Kendrick Lamar, like, sit down, be humble. Like,
that's amazing.
You're there.
So it's amazing for a specific reason. I have to just say, in my culture document for my company, there's an entire slide that has the word sit down, stay humble, and then it has a description of why it's important to be humble. And it includes a big description, and it shows the CD cover of Humble. So that is literally something that is sent to everybody who joins my team.
That's awesome.
Because it's so important, right? It's so important. It's not that you shouldn't be great and be proud when you get stuff right and do well, but you are going to make mistakes. And being humble is a way to learn and bounce back faster, because nobody starts a new job, especially a first job, and doesn't make mistakes. So that bouncing back process is so key. And so much of that is losing your sense of like, oh yeah, like, you know, I'm the shit.
Right.
You know, like you can't. No. Because if you think you already know everything, you're not going to ask questions, and you're not going to go out on a limb, and you're not going to take criticism the right way to actually learn from it. But I do think the other side of that is that you can't let that kind of dropping your guard lead you into imposter syndrome either, you know? And this is a big thing that everyone talks about with millennials. We have imposter syndrome. It's so bad. But I don't know. I think you have to have this right mindset of, yes, you're going to make mistakes and you should embrace that fact, but you also shouldn't let that guide you into feeling like you don't deserve to be there. Like, humble shouldn't equate like not being worthy. You know, clearly you deserve to be there, whether it was your interview or previous jobs or your schooling or whatever. Like, you showed that you deserve that job for a reason, and you shouldn't feel like you're faking it every day, but you shouldn't also be afraid to feel like you've got a ways to go. And I mean, if none of that works, just bring in food. Everyone always loves food. So
That's awesome.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Claire. I find that, and I really learned this when I started my job at CAA, because I was working in a national office in a federation, which was a completely different world for me. I went from working in an agency where we had, you know, a mid-sized team, but like everyone that I spoke to every single day was a communicator, to all of a sudden coming into an organization where I'm a national office, not a head office. So it means that we can't tell the regional clubs what to do, but they can't tell us what to do. So we just have to work well together. So there's all about like this relationship building thing going on, and like just trying to wrap your head around this sort of new corporate world was really, really difficult for me in the first 30 days. And that's what I spent a lot of my first month trying to figure out is, where does the power lie in this organization? That's just kind of important for me to know in general about like, who do I need to keep happy, right? But then also how does information, you know, flow from one club to another, to national, back to another club? Like, how does that whole organization work? So one of the sort of advice that I would offer is learn a lot about the organization, but also just learn about the power structure of your organization, and learn how, more importantly, information flows through your organization. That's super key, especially if you're in the corporate world. And, you know, heaven forbid you end up in a confusing federation like I do. It may take you more than a month to figure it out, but just knowing about how information flows through your organization, I find is really important, especially if you're the communicator or the public relations professional, because a lot of your job is going to be helping crafting message that's going to be flowing through that organization. So that I felt was really important for me to figure out in the first month. But, you know, going back to Claire's point about, you know, imposter and humble syndrome, again, because I was coming into this new world, it's really hard for me to walk around and say, yeah, I know what's going on. You know, I'm the shit, right? I've got this covered, when it's like, I've never been in a federation before. I actually have no idea how information flows. And to assume that I know how a federation works actually makes me look more stupid, You know what I mean? It makes me look like I'm unprofessional and I don't know what I'm doing. So going in humble obviously really helps you, helps you be more open to the training and to learning more. But it also makes you look smarter, I find. I find that people who come into an organization and new employees that I've met at CAA who've come in and they're completely open and humble about everything. And they're just there to absorb and to learn. And they're not there to say, yeah, I know more than you. Those kinds of people, I find I'm like, you're smart and you're going to make it, you're going to make it far, right? Because they're so open to that. They're just open to wanting to learn more. So not only I think it just makes you look smart if you come in being humble.
Well, it doesn't. 10 times out of 10, if you come up with an ingenious new idea to add to the organization, someone might have probably definitely already come up with it. Like if it's your second day and you're like, oh, this is great, they'll never think. Like, no, somebody's thought of it. Like, get in there.
That is so true.
It is. And it's the same, especially like in journalism, like a pitch meeting. You come and you're like, oh, I have this amazing pitch on like your first day. Someone pitched it last week. You have to go in every day. You have to do the damn thing. You have to learn who you are and where you fit into that area, that this new space, this new structure, this new culture that you're in. And you have to aim to learn something new and take something new from it every single day. And that's how you're going to find that eventually you're going to stop learning, not because you know everything, but because you've kind of settled into that role and you understand more. You'll have that knowledge, but you have to start by asking the questions.
And so bouncing off of that in the first, I still do it, I guess. But in the first few months of starting at CAA, I would walk into my boss's office and I was like, I've got this idea. But then I caveated it with, I've got this idea. I have no idea if anyone's pitched this before. This may have been something that you guys already thought about, but you know what? I want to share this idea for two reasons. A, if it's never been done or never been brought up, then it's a good idea and we should probably do it. Two, if it has been pitched and it didn't work, I need to know why it didn't work. I need to know what specifically about this idea does not work in this federation, so that when I have another idea, to your point, Claire, it's not that I know everything, it's just I know that these types of ideas don't work. And so that little lesson is really important. So bringing up ideas and walking into that pitch meeting and saying, I've got an idea, you just caveat it, right? Just saying, I've got an idea. This may have been pitched last week. I have no idea, but I just want to know if it works. And if it doesn't, tell me why it doesn't work. And that's a huge, big sort of all that sort of lesson adds to your toolkit on so that any sort of future ideas that you want to bring forward, you can reach into that toolkit and say, okay, is this idea going to work according to all these things that I've learned in the first month?
Hey, podcast listeners, if you're enjoying today's episode, which you obviously are because you're here, please leave us a review on iTunes. It really helps others discover the show and helps us keep doing what we're doing. Thank you in advance. Now, back to the show.
So let's jump to first impressions. So your first 30 days, you're going to be meeting a ton of new people in your new organization. First impressions, I find, are really important in a new job. They can really make or break the experience that you're going to gain in that organization. I was reading an article by Agility PR, and they put it really nicely. So you're told your entire life not to judge a book by its cover, yet it's impossible to avoid. Biologically, humans are hardwired to make quick judgments as a way of identifying threats. So yes, everyone's told not to judge a book by a cover, but in reality, we all have that predisposed judgment that comes out when we meet someone for the first time. So I really wanted to talk about first impressions because in the first 30 days, you're probably going to make 30, if not more, first impressions.
All of your impressions are first.
Yeah, exactly. So let's start with you, Ross. I mean, you're probably good. You probably have tons of first impressions, not just in new jobs, but when you're meeting new clients. So curious to know, what are your sort of tools that you use to help you build that really good first impression?
Yeah, so It's very tough. I think first impressions are one of those things that are super important when it comes to getting a new job or meeting a client. But the way that you navigate a first impression really depends on the person on the other end, right? Like everybody has their own perception. Like everybody who's listening to this podcast is perceiving it differently because of the way that they've been brought up, the way that they've been interacting with the world over the last few months, how much they've traveled, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of different things that influence us and how we receive things. So when it comes to first impressions, it's also very much the same way. Certain people are going to be put off by certain things that other people would love. So it's really about figuring out the culture of those around you when you first approach it, as it relates to kind of like what they value, what they see as being important, what they like and what they dislike, and using that to your advantage. So when Claire's talking about bringing food, some organizations really do love it when you bring snacks and treats, and that is an amazing first impression. But at the same time, some companies would look at that as, oh, look at the new person trying to suck up to everyone, right? So you have to understand the culture around who it is that you're around before you start to kind of approach it. But for me, the things that I like to always kind of demonstrate right away is a commitment to being agile with my beliefs and my opinions and my thoughts. So if I'm going into a dialogue, if I'm going into a company for the first time, I'm okay with shifting my stance on something. I would believe that the people who are there before me have a deeper and better understanding of the way things work. So I go into that with the flexibility of, I'm going to share my thoughts, but I'm okay with you guys adjusting them in my first month or so, because at the end of the day, I trust that you know more than I do. And that's typically a great way to kind of lend a solid first impression. The second piece would be demonstrating hard work and a commitment to excellence when it comes to the work that you're putting out there. So you do want to be able to kind of demonstrate that you do go above and beyond. You don't want to have typos in your emails. I know we had a big debate about typos before, but in that first month, they do matter. Like you do want to ensure that you don't. In that first month, you do want to ensure that you don't have a bunch of typos. You want to ensure that you're signing off your emails correctly. You're saying the right names when you introduce yourself to people. Like you want to ensure that you're crossing your T's and dotting your I's. Otherwise, you open up an opportunity where you could very quickly become somebody who is hated in the office.
Man.
What about you, Claire?
I think, well, to jump off of Ross's point, like I think it's so good. Like that idea of reading people, right? Like reading people and approaching people in situations with neutrality can never be stated enough. Like just never go in expecting something. And whatever you learn about people, remember it, right? Make notes in your mind. You never want to be that person that goes up when you do have food, because maybe your office does like food, and you offer Sally a chocolate chip muffin only to realize, oh, right, she's lactose intolerant. But she told me that, but I forgot, right? So that idea of reading people, understanding them, getting to know them better. But I also think, to Ross's point, that idea of typos. Honestly, sometimes it happens. It's so good and it's so important to try and like get names right and do things. But if shit happens, honestly, the most important thing you can do for a first impression is be nice. Like, I know it sounds so simple and it just comes down to this basic tenet of human interaction, but being nice, whether you're coming in as a manager or you're starting at the bottom of the totem pole, you're new, you're at the bottom, like don't look down on other people who have other positions maybe, or, anything else, because if anyone has been there longer than you, even by like a day, they automatically are an asset to you and someone who can help you and can teach you something. And that's the key. And other people can help you and teach you things no matter what their title. So don't look down at anyone. Just be nice. Be a good person. I know it sounds so stupid to be like, be a good person. But having that comes it's one of the most important things, because you could flub up. You could say the wrong thing. And if you can kind of laugh at yourself and you're a generally nice person, people will forgive you those mistakes that you make, because they know it doesn't come from a deep-rooted place within you. And there's this thing that I saw, it was on like a pin once, but it was called like the pyramid of being a decent human, which sounds so odd, but they did it like Maslow's hierarchy style. And the base is respect. Mm-hmm. And being nice is on there too, by the way, but that base, that foundation is respect. And I think just being a good person and respecting other people and being kind and humble and, you know, generous as well with the effort that you're giving, the time that you're offering, you know, the way you're treating other people is so important, because then people will reflect that back to you at the moments when you most need it, aka the entire first 30, 60, 6 months or whatever that you're starting a job. And that kind of dynamic, I'm not going to call it a relationship necessarily, because there are coworkers that you don't necessarily have a relationship with, but that mutual respect and kindness dynamic is one of the most powerful tools in your toolkit when you're starting a new job.
Yeah. And I mean, bouncing off of that, like you were saying, every first impression counts. Doesn't matter who they are, what their title is, whether it's the VP, director, president, the receptionist, doesn't matter. Because you're right in the sense that everyone plays an important role, not just at the organization, but an important role for you. And I like to use this example because I used to work at an agency, and we used to put together proposals, and sometimes that required printing out binders full of, paper. So I would be printing until 9 o'clock at night, 300 pages worth for this proposal, and, carefully putting it into a binder and making sure that all the dividers were there and all the labels made sense. But, printers, they die all the time. Like, I don't know, we're able to put someone on the moon. We're able to build electric vehicles. We're able to build autonomous cars, yet every single massive, those big copy things break down at least once a day. I don't get it. But anyway, so I love to use the example of you've got 45 minutes before you've got to get into a cab and drop this, drop this proposal off, and you notice that there's a typo on page 1 and you have to replace that page, and you go and you print something out and the printer craps out. And then all of a sudden you run to the receptionist because, he or she is the one who deals with the printer and knows how to fix it. And if you didn't have a good first impression, or if you looked down on that person on the first day and you didn't, to Claire's point, didn't respect them, then do you really think that they're going to help you in that time of need? Do you think that she or he is going to actually take time out of their day to walk over and fix the, printer for you, right? So you never know when it's going to happen where you're going to need that lending hand or that helping hand or that familiar face in a crowd. And that's why, I love the word that you used, Claire, was respect. Respect for everyone in the organization. And, I know a lot of our listeners are probably looking at just their first job, but eventually, if you climb the ladder high enough, you're going to be getting a new job where you're going to be higher, and you're not going to be at the bottom of the totem pole, but you may be a manager, or you may be a senior manager. And coming in with that respect and that humbleness, and not assuming that just because you have a higher title, you're better than anyone who might be a coordinator or a receptionist or whatever their title is, is going to help you build relationships with those people. And again, open up that door for more learning. Because again, if you walk in and you're just like, hi, I'm the new senior manager, and because I have a higher title, I know that I'm more important than you, you're not going to make it very far. And to be successful in an organization, I feel like you need to have relationships, or what did you say, Claire? The dynamic. You need to have a positive dynamic with everyone in that organization. Because if you have people hating you, you're gonna have to, on top of just dealing with your everyday job and dealing with hiccups, you don't want to have people who are trying to put spokes in the way and put spokes in your tires as you're trying to move forward, right? So, yeah, I guess it goes back to what Claire was saying, and being, plain and simple, but being nice and respecting everyone and being humble and open to hearing from everyone. One thing that Claire was saying about, bringing a muffin to someone who was, gluten-free or something like that, and then forgetting. It was a while ago, we had talked about, how to get ready for a new job or something like that on the podcast. And someone had sent in a little message. This was years ago when we first started the podcast. And someone had a really good idea. They create this little map of their office. what they did on their first job, like their first day, is they created, because of course their new boss said, all right, come with me, I'm going to introduce you. There's always that, your first day is they walk you around the office. If it's an office, right? They walk you around the office and they introduce you to everyone. Here's John from accounting, and here's, Lucy from marketing or whatever. So what this particular listener did is she built, she just on a piece of paper, was creating a map as she was going through the office. And every single time she would meet someone new, she'd write their name down. And then if they happened to say anything interesting about I've got 5 kids, or I just came back from a trip in Hawaii or something like that, she'd write Hawaii, 5 kids, or any sort of little interesting tidbit that she would get from that first sort of interaction with them. And then as the first month went on, she obviously learned new things about different people. And the way that she said that she learned information was she had to write things down. And if she wrote it down at least once or twice, then it kind of stuck in her memory. And she used the example of knowing that there was someone who was gluten-free in the office, and she wrote down gluten-free, and she circled it 5 times. And the first time that she brought in treats, she brought in a gluten-free option. Well, you could only imagine how, how respected that person felt, that this new, woman who came to the organization less than a week ago and is bringing us treats. Not only is she bringing us treats, but she actually remembered that I told her I was gluten-free. Now you're the star of the office, right? So,
yeah, that's brilliant.
I remember someone giving me or responding to one of our earlier episodes with that idea, and I said I have to share it because that is the greatest hack for a new job, right?
That is number one. I think the other important hack that all of our listeners should know, if they don't already, is that any organization, especially big ones, any receptionist, secretary, anyone who's in administration and runs people, is the key to everything. They know how to fix jammed printers. They know how to butter up people when you need to ask a favor. They know everything. Okay, they're like MacGyver. You want them on your side. And that's just the number one rule. Always be nice to whoever's at the front desk, because they are the key to everything.
Well, Claire, seeing as you're back, you can do your old thing where you introduce the lessons learned.
Oh my gosh, it's like riding a bike. All right, so now's the moment where we get to talk about what we learned today. And we're going to start with me, because I'm center stage right now. So I think what I learned today is that it's a really good idea to make a map. I'd never thought of that before. No, but it's it makes sense, just some kind of visual representation. Because even when I think about my office right now, there are so many winding desks and rooms and other places and stuff. And I know people's faces, but I don't know names. So that I think is really, really smart. The other thing I think I learned today is that there are offices out there that don't like it when you bring in food. And I don't know how I feel about that.
I don't know.
Ross, that's not you're okay with it, right?
Oh no, I love food.
Okay, good. I was so afraid. I was like, Ross. But yes, no, those are my main takeaways from today. And now why don't we move on to Ross?
Yeah, so I think my big takeaway was more of a reminder from Claire around how stressful the first month can be for somebody jumping in the weeds for the first time. It's a good reminder that everybody's kind of experience is like that, and recognizing the fact that you have to stay calm in terms of the highs and the lows is really an important lesson for anybody who's just starting out with a gig, but I think it's also an important lesson for anyone in business as a whole. The idea of celebrating your wins, but also recognizing that you're going to have some of those low days and be able to be neutral with all of it is an important lesson that everyone needs to kind of remember and embrace.
Christine?
So I think what I learned is I think I found the one word that encompasses everything for your 30-day challenge, and that's the word respect. If you respect everyone around you, then you're going to build the right relationships. If you respect the job itself, then you're going to be opening to learning. And if you respect the organization, again, you're just going to be open. You're going to be open and humble enough to just learn more and to grow within that organization. So the lesson learned for me is that is a very important word. And you know what? You should write it on a piece of paper for your 30-day challenge and just put that on your board and remind yourself, like, respect is, I think, the key to being successful in those first 30 days.
Man, I really want to sing Aretha Franklin right now.
That's awesome. It is so good to have Claire's humor.
I can't sing.
Finally, a funny podcast again.
I know.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Young PR Pros. We would love to hear from you and hear how we did. You can email us at youngprpros@gmail.com. Check out our blog at youngprpros.ca. We're also on Facebook at Young PR Pros Podcast. And of course, Twitter at Young PR Pros. Thanks, and we'll talk to you next time. This episode featured tracks by Poddington Bear, sound work and editing by Clare Bonnyman.